on the unmarked, unguarded border between the Central African Republic and the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. They specialize in abducting children and even forcing children to kill, young children to kill their fathers. What the people have done, they've organized themselves into a militia called the Arrow Boys. We actually met some of 3,000 men armed with bows and arrows. This was in 2011. And in the Congo, the pygmies have been driven from their homes for the first time in recorded history. And we don't get it because our journalism, if you can call it journalism, is full of celebrity stories, and they're worrying about Cheryl, whoever she is. There's something about her in this book of dodgy poems too. But I've sort of betted on long enough that I would say that, you know, we just got to get real. And if I commit these kind of things to get real. I wonder how. Probably some of you will know. There's a phenomenon called the Black Swan event. Donald Rumsfeld was hugely mocked for talking about the known knowns and the unknown knowns and the unknown unknowns. But in fact, he was right onto something that all our military academies and senior staff officers are well aware of. The Black Swan event is sudden, unpredictable and catastrophic. And it's called a Black Swan event because it was always supposed that one of the distinguishing features of swans was they had white feathers. That is until black swans were discovered in Australia in the 19th century. There is a book about black swans here, I can't find it, but we have to understand, as our military do, that we are up against something that, you know, the classic instance of the Black Swan event actually was 9/11, and see what the effects of that were. And I think we just have to get real. Can you find my Black Swan poem? Right. You'll find it good. Then I'll stop. Right. It's a bit like William Topaz McGonagall. I'll spare you the opening stanzas. Black Swan events are those that cannot hurt us because they never have, the world agrees. Until they do, like fire on phosphorus. The 9/11 attacks were some of these. These are the analysts' unknown unknowns, the things we can't predict and never will. They are not traceable on mapped war zones that strike us from the blind side of the hill. We hear the beating of the black swan's wings, which we thought couldn't happen. We were wrong. We are beset by strange outlying things, and one of these could be the Black Swan's song. Thank you. I'll answer any questions. I'm party politicians, I'll talk about anything. I'll give you my requiem. I do have a requiem for political parties, though. Which I think is insane. I forget. Let me take some questions. You know, indifferent to the people's warning, the party's headed for fall. Tory, Labour, and Lib Dem. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will of course remember them, but miss them not at all.
Spell, which of our recent wars would you consider to have been justified, and why? And more importantly, which possible future wars would you consider to be justified?
Well, let's go with the future. I think a war for national survival, yes. I might be a pacifist, but for the Second World War, it's impossible for me to argue that that was not necessary and justified. I think that the point I would make is that very seldom does the application of armed force deliver the outcomes that the politicians expect of it, because don't listen. There's a wonderful, recently retired General Rupert Smith who wrote a book, The Utility of Force, which explains over and over again how we can lose by winning. That is, by applying excessive military force, as we may be doing in Afghanistan, we are in fact recruiting for the other side. I think I could just about argue the Falklands War was justified, though the more I talk to the Falklands veterans, the more I realise what a close run thing it was. If the Argentinians had fused their bombs better, if they had a better quality of troops on the island, and what really scares me about that war, it's very short, about 6 weeks. We lost, I think the total was 252 soldiers, sailors and Marines in that war. among the veterans, more than that number, 269 have since taken their own lives. This is PTSD, and it is getting really scary. Yes?
Mr. Bell, would you agree that one of the main purposes of a Member of Parliament is to be a check on the executive?
Mm-hmm.
That being the case, do you consider an independent, i.e. independent of a specific party, has any real influence in Parliament in these days?
Well, I can only speak from experience. I mean, there have only been 3 elected independents in the last 60 years, and I was one of them. I think that it is possible to have more influence than mere lobby funding, simply because you probably have a higher media profile and you can be listened to. But I can't claim to have been a great and brilliant MP. You can't judge my own record. But I led the campaign on the floor of the House for a compensation to the 7,000 then surviving former prisoners of war of the Japanese, and that was successful. And there was an occasion when I was able to use my position in the interface between politics and the media, when we were trying to get Princess Diana was instrumental in it, the anti-personnel mine treaty. We needed to have some time for it on the floor of the House at the time of the devolution legislation was going through. And Robin Cook, who was then George Robertson, was saying that they couldn't find the time. So I came up against him one day on the Today Show. I said, George, I'll tell you what, if you don't have time in this session, I'm talking this about the summer of '98, let's recall Parliament on the anniversary of Princess Diana's death, the 31st of August, and do it then. Next week, they found the time. So you can do little things, yeah. Yes.
How do you survive a war journalists protect yourselves from the trauma?
How do we protect yourselves? Well, from the trauma is in this book I describe how we used to do these things on a wing and a prayer. And I once got shot up in an old BBC Carlton, a Vauxhall Carlton, crossing the Sarajevo airport runway. And of course it had no armour at all, but the bullets actually stopped in the door jamb without penetrating it. So I wrote to Vauxhall afterwards and thanked them for making a tank without doing it. PTSD is tougher. I should be the victim. I don't think I am. I don't think I'm in denial. If you go to any of the combat stress respite centres, a very high proportion of Marines and paras in there. But there are some people who are completely unscathed. You might find a former Army catering corps cook who's never been in any frontline action. They're still trying to work out fracture lines.
Any thoughts about Syria, present situation?
Well, since I've been at sea for the last 2 weeks, I've been a bit out of touch. It has to be, I don't think that the West can do it on its own. I mean, the Arab world is responsible for what happens in the Arab world. And I'm very struck that the monarchies seem to be surviving the Arab Spring much better than the republics. But I don't think we can send our troops in there. I don't think, well, we don't have to be hardly got any left to send. Yes, sir.
Is it possible, in your opinion, that the Arabs and the Israelis could ever actually come to an agreement?
Of all the wars I've been in and the disputes that I've witnessed, time and again, some you think is absolutely hopeless. A solution is found. Happened in Namibia, it happened in Angola after 22 years, happened in Cambodia, happened in El Salvador. Now the cruise ships stop in Vietnam. The most intractable and difficult has always seemed to be Arab-Israel. And it's just a state of armed ceasefire, mutual hostility remains. I don't see a solution. I'm a veteran, well, if that's the right word, of both the Arab-Israeli wars of '67 and '73. And one of the things that strikes me most is how we all are brilliant at reinventing our history. I mean, we British do it. I think we even think of Dieppe as a positive experience. Dunkirk was a deliverance rather than a defeat. And I'm very struck when I go through the Suez Canal. There's a huge monument